Okay, look at her. Vander Van Odd. You've worked with all the winners of Dragula.
Yes. Oh, well, I think at this point it should be obvious that I love Vander.
Yes, yes.
Vander's another person that I worked with early on. Actually, very, very early on. I was sort of at the beginning of my exposure career. And it was when one of the first times that I worked with Vander was at Exposure, but I was also doing my first show at the time. And Vander was willing to be in the show. And just watching Vander versus a lot of the other performers, you know, I hate to compare performers because everyone has their merits and everybody that put themselves out there is worthy and valid, but there's always gonna be some people that stand out, and Vander was definitely one of those people that stood out to me, not only as a performer, but just as a person, and their kindness really struck me. And so after Vander performed, and then when I found out Vander was gonna be on Dragula, I was not at all surprised when Vander won.
Now, you've mentioned a couple times Exposure Drag, which I've been to several times, and it really serves an important purpose, I think, in the Qween's ecosystem of performing, because Exposure Drag was a show which was, you were doing it for exposure, right?
Exactly.
Occasionally they would pay someone like a guest star, but mostly it was girls would come. And tell me how that went down, what that scene was like.
You know, and I think that it really shaped my experience of show world. When I first started doing drag, my very first performance solo was at Akbar with Tony Soto. It was a show called Learn the Words, Bitch. But literally the next day I was at Exposure, and when I started that was sort of my entrance. It was my first permanent gig. It was my first, you know, ongoing gig, and I was so grateful for the experience, because when you're starting drag and you don't know anybody and you don't know how to do your makeup, you don't know how to dress yourself, right, you don't know anything, you are just praying that somebody will take you in and allow you to get up on stage and do something. And Exposure was that place for me, and I will forever be grateful for Exposure, because I would not have been able to hone my craft. I would not have been able to put myself out there to develop the confidence that is needed to, you know, to be a performer without Exposure. And, you know, I'm just so grateful for the experience. I think that, you know, they don't really judge you based off of how long you've been doing it. They don't judge you off of how you look. They judge you off of what you put into it. And I think that is really something to be considered when it comes to drag, is the effort that you're putting into it. You might not be perfect, you might not be polished, but if you're trying and putting yourself out there, that's gotta be worth something. And apparently it was. So I started doing Exposure Drag July 2015. I went 1 week and I didn't stop for almost 5 years. Yeah. And again, I would not have been able to test out a lot of the, you know, wacky performances that I've done in drag without Exposure. I wouldn't have been able to test out a lot of new looks or anything without that opportunity. And so, you're right, you know, Exposure is kind of what they pay you in. And, you know, the tips were good.
Yeah, I remember the audience made the money rain down, and it was a very lively audience who really appreciated what was going on. And I saw a lot of creativity there.
Exactly, and I think the important thing about that is, you know, of course, as artists, we all want to be paid. We all want to make money for our craft. But as new artists, I think that it's also important to have spaces that you can hone your craft, that you can develop your craft. And there are very few spaces like that. Or, you know, maybe it's a space where, hey, they'll let you do a tip spot once, or, you know, maybe you can come back next month or the month after. But to have a place that will allow new people to come in week after week after week and put themselves out there and get better and better, you know, that was a blessing for me and for a lot of other drag performers. And that was kind of how I grew up a little bit in the drag industry. I kind of, you know, I think that there's a lot of talk right now about having to, you know, the debate about whether or not you should pay your dues in the drag world. And I think that that was kind of how I, quote unquote, paid my dues, was by doing that show each and every week. But, you know, even though I wasn't paid money, I was paid in something else. I was paid in the opportunity to be able to do that. And there were no other shows or organizations that were like, hey, come on in, come be a part of our show every week. We'd love to have you. And I think that's really cool. And it was really inspiring to a lot of new performers. And it really helped a lot of new performers become seasoned performers.
All right, look at her. Your bestie, Indica Sativa. Your Wigs and Waffles co-host.
My says, I love Indica so much. Her and I are a bit of an odd pair. We're totally different in so many different ways, but so similar in so many different ways. We met at when I was doing Green Eggs and Glam very early on, and I was still like struggling to get a cast. And I remember her reaching out to me from God knows where, and she was like, hey, can I be in the show? And I was like, yeah, totally. So she came in, we had a great kiki, and then we ended up having her back every single week. And she became a huge part of that particular show. And then we started doing other shows together. We did a show called Homegirls. We did a show, we did Wigs and Waffles together. We also did another show called Bacon and Legs, which was another brunch. And she's amazing. I love her to death. She's something else. She's a character, and I don't know what it is about her and I that click, but we just click, and we always just have so much fun together, and we just laugh and laugh and laugh.
And that is what is important. Now, last but not least, look at her. The beautiful Lady Red, your Wigs and Waffles co-star. She gave you good advice on Pimp My Drag, and just a wonderful person, very supportive of young queens in general.
Lady Red, just something else entirely. Just a really magical, magical person. You know, I have no shade to say about her, but I will say that she was the queen of shade.
Yes, she was, honey.
I just remember, like, she was so easy to work with. Well, first of all, she gave me so many opportunities early on. She helped me with my makeup early on. She had me in some of her shows. And again, this was at a time where, you know, I thought I looked good, but in retrospect. And she was one of those people that took a chance on me, and not a lot of people did. And then what was really interesting is, you know, I feel like in many ways, I wish that Lady Red would have had more opportunities because of how amazing and wonderful she was. I think that I would have loved to have seen her on Drag Race.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen her doing a lot more in the community because she was so capable and so willing. And so, yeah, so to go from having her teach me how to do makeup and have her put me in her shows to then have her in my shows, it was really just like, I can't even like put it into words. It was really just like fulfilling and really like full circle and just really like, I don't know, I can't put it into words how special Lady Red was. And whenever we would have her at Wigs and Waffles, you know, she was always the first to show up. She was always, you know, fully ready, and she was no fuss whatsoever. She was one of the easiest people to work with, one of the least diva people to work with, which, you know, you might not necessarily think, because I feel like Lady Red often gave off a diva persona.
Yes, she did.
But when it came down to working with her, she was so easy to work with and so kind and so welcoming. And I saw her take in a lot of the newer performers under her wing, and I think that that's a really special quality that she had, and I'm still reeling over the loss of her. You know, I was just talking to Indica last night, and we were talking about how we can't believe that Red's gone. And, you know, to have, especially because we got a lot closer in the last year or so before she passed, when she was working at Wigs and Waffles,
Right,
and we
you
got
saw
to
her
see
every
her every
week, yeah.
weekend. And that often extended into after the show. You know, we would have the after show kiki, the after show eating, the after show, you know, rooftop excursion.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think one of the most tragic things about it is, again, not really being able to get to say goodbye, because when lockdown happened, when quarantine happened, you know, you're not thinking, oh, this is gonna be the last time I get to see somebody.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I found out about Lady Red's passing, I just didn't know how to respond, you know, and I'm still kind of in this weird world about it because it still almost doesn't seem real because we're still in this quarantine world where you're not seeing all of the people that you're used to seeing, you know? And
Yeah.
so we're still really suffering from her loss.
Definitely. Never to be forgotten. We love you, Lady Red.
We love you, Lady Red.
Right, Adam and Erica?
We love you, Lady Red. She's missed, for
She
sure.
is missed. Well, thank you so much for being here, Maebe. Always a pleasure. We're very proud of the work you're doing. I know Lady Red was proud of what you were doing and loved you, so thanks for being here. We're always fans of yours.
Thank you so much. I so enjoyed being here.
All right. Thank you to Adam and Erica. You're serving it, Kent. And thanks to all of you. We'll see you next time on Hey Qween. And look at her. Hit it.
Look at her. Look at her.
Oh, look at them. And look at her. What's she doing? She's serving the people. Look at her. Bye, baby. See you next time. Now get out of here, camera. Go on. Just hop along, camera.
Look at her. Look at her.